Hand clap to the massive guys. We are finally back again for another one on the one and only Mystelics reaction channel, guys. Big up yourself, big up all the Mystelics YouTube family who have definitely tuned in to another reaction. And of course, guys, don't forget to check out the previous one that I actually did today. That'll be the first comment in the comment box below, guys. And of course, big up to all the newcomers out there as well for definitely tuning into this here reaction video, guys. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe and turn on that post notification, guys. Click the subscribe button. When you click that, guys, click the bell and then click all, and you'll be pretty much notified when I drop my videos right there. And then, guys, definitely don't forget to do this in this regard. Let us get into the vibrations of this year reaction video. We're gonna react into the Prime Minister and exactly why he called it, because he seems to want to blame the UWP, saying, hey, you guys couldn't face up to us, so we look us. But apparently there's something that needs to be said, guys. I said it that I'll be doing this one, and of course let's get into it right there.
We are now faced with tragedies even in November and December because of climate change. My dear brothers and sisters, on another important note, I wish to assure residents of Dominica that the government is working assiduously to alleviate the current petrol challenges confronting us, occasioned again by recent weather conditions.
But Mr. Prime Minister, isn't that as a result of you? Isn't that your fault? Because when Ruby's was saying that the prices that they are coming in, Ruby's is no longer in Dominica, from my understanding, guys. Ruby's, even though you see the gas stations and stuff, they're not there. I think there's some sort of thing that they have with Petro Caribbean or some wherever. Anyways, Ruby's was bringing in their own gas and stuff, and as a result of that, you know, gas was flowing in the Caribbean, in Dominica. Gas was flowing like crazy all over the place. They didn't have much of a problem, but they realized that it's very expensive, as of course the regulators, the Prime Minister, they are the ones pretty much regulating, you know, the gas prices and stuff. So they felt like they have been making a loss for over 11 years, about 11 years. So there were more gas boats coming in to bring gas to the people, so that there won't be a strain. However, as a result of what you guys did this. Ruby's had to pull out, and as a result of them pulling out, they're not bringing their boats and stuff in. So we're reliant on one boat to bring gas for everybody. That is because of you guys. Nobody else's fault but you guys. And one of the reasons why Ruby's had to leave is solely because you guys already had the cap that was so high that when they were going to sell, they were already selling at a loss. So when they brought in their own gas outside of West Indian oil and whoever oil that was thinking, they were already doing it at a loss, because you guys were the ones putting the cap on the thing, saying they cannot go over to make profits and this kind of things. It's always limited. So that's very interesting right there that you're talking about the gas prices, because notice this is only happening in Dominica. Notice, guys, this is only happening in Dominica. Nowhere else for them to say there's gas shortages around the world and those kind of things. No, it is in Dominica that is happening. Is that happening in St. Kitts? No. Is that happening in Grenada? No. St. Lucia, St. Vincent? Where? No. Only Dominica this is happening, because we have less. We are now reliant on one West Indian oil for gas. I mean, think, people. And it's interesting that he mentioned that the conditions of what is taking place in the East. Yet still he has money set aside for his campaign elections. And it's not to say he didn't know it was happening. If he didn't know that was happening, it's fine. And your election campaign just happened to be, you know, at the same realm of the thing. But you knew it was happening. You literally said it in your speech.
We are now faced with tragedies even in November and December because of climate change.
You said this. You know this was going on before you started to launch your campaign. It was on the very same day that tragedy hit the east of Dominica that you announced your own campaign. You could have withheld this and say, okay, let's wait a bit. But you know why you couldn't wait. We will get into that in a moment. Let's continue right there.
Alleviate the current petrol is expected on Wednesday morning. And I want you to know that this current inconvenience is but temporary.
It's temporary for now. This has happened before. This has happened before. This is just the longest stint that it has happened before, where gas finished yesterday and people had to be parking their vehicle at the gas station and taking bus or whatever they could take for them to go, or join their friends or whatever to go, whoever out gas. Leave their vehicle by the gas station because their vehicle run out of gas.
Be resolved within the next 24 hours.
I'll go to my bed and relax myself.
My brothers and sisters, I don't normally pay much attention to what my detractors are saying or doing. But someone sent me the news article today in which a headless political party considered it.
You don't pay attention to what your detractors are saying and you're talking about the opposition party. Aren't you in most of your speeches just calling Lennox, Linton, Lennox, Linton, Lennox, this, Lennox, that? Aren't you the one who was mentioning his name, just constantly Lennox, whereas Lennox on the other hand doesn't be SKERRIT. You are the one who keeps, but you say he doesn't listen to your detractor. It's interesting that you would say that.
It was in no way, shape or form ready to contest an election and therefore has surrendered.
Who has surrendered? Nobody has surrendered. The UWP didn't surrender, no? Well, let's continue. We'll get into that.
They have surrendered. My friends, life is about choices. That is their choice. And we respect their choice.
Well, really and truly, I mean, you did say that before the next general election, you would need to have voter electoral reform. You were the one who stated this very thing some time back. Even before 2019, you were saying that electoral reform will come and whatnot, blah blah blah. Has having several meetings for it. Several meetings with the civil servants, civil unions, whatever they calling them. Your church members, whatnot, blah, blah, blah. You are having these meetings to have electoral reform. And the basis that they are not having electoral reform is clear. That electoral reform has not been done, even ruled by the CCJ, the apex court of the Caribbean or the country, right there, in a written decision. That is, in its opinion, there remains areas of grave concern about the process of these elections in 2019, of course, which was conducted. Future elections in Dominica ought not to proceed with these or similar taints. What they were asking for is clean voters list reflecting the persons who are legally or who are able, who can legally vote, and national ID cards available to all the legitimate voters. These things are not in place. They are not in place, yet still you call in another election. Even the very CCJ realized that something needs to be done to remove the taints and the different kinks and this kind of things that hindering free and fair elections in Dominica. They could see this, yet still you call another elections, not even 3 years in. December 6th would give it 3 years in. We're in November 9. Yet still you call in elections and saying that they have conceded because they feel that they could win. But you didn't keep up to the bargain. You didn't keep up to it. Even when you considered to call Sir Byron to do these things, and he was doing it. But we'll get into that in a moment. We will get into that in a moment.
But if I was in a party that had no leader, no policy,
and I agree. At present, good for it. It'll be a much good for you that there is no leader in the other team. But you still had to keep up with what you were saying about electoral reform. You had to keep it. But there's a reason why you didn't keep it, though. We'll get to that in a moment.
Philosophy or friends, no friends, local or foreign, and no active presence in the villages and communities and constituencies in Dominica.
So you say,
I would say to that party, go run.
But Mr. Prime Minister, if you guys have been active in the communities, what have you guys been doing in the communities that's actually helping the people? Building houses for people doesn't help them, no? It's like giving people money to spend in the economy that doesn't produce any opportunities for them to be able to invest the money to develop themselves. They just have to spend it and it's gone. That is the Dominica that you have created. You build house for them because the people themselves cannot build house because of the economy that you have created. So you saying that they're not in the economy, they're not in the village, they're not in the communities. You saying this, you know. I disagree with you, but let's say you're correct. And you are the one in the community. You seen the guay and the struggles of the people in the community, and you do nothing to put money in their pockets so they can be dependent on themselves. You seen the struggles of the people, man. You in the community every day, let's say, I don't know, let's say every day, every waking hour, you in the community and you seen what is happening. And that is the state that you live in the people with you in the community. That's what you're saying. You're saying the other team is not in the community, which means you are in the community and you've seen what is going on. You've seen what is going on.
Don't run. You do not want to get defeated a sixth time again.
Bribery and cheating all during these times is
So their decision not to contest the elections has nothing to do with incomplete report of the sole commissioner on
but it's not complete
electoral reform.
But it's really interesting though, Mr. Prime Minister. Isn't one of your friends, your so-called friends, were the ones telling you this very thing right there? Isn't this from Tony Astafans? Isn't this what your friend was telling you, Mr. Prime Minister? In 2008, 2008, he was telling this very thing. Urgent. He said, please do not drift too far. Tried calling you again today and just cannot get through. I spoke to this lawyer right there this morning. There is madness going on at the commission. You need to call in Richard and well, these two individuals. I leave today. That is what Tony is saying. These guys are talking about reforms to include ID cards and complete registration. Such reforms will undermine your re-election legacy. As the opposition will say, look, the commission agreed with us. Reform was required because of widespread fraud. So even your friends knew that if reform took place, that it will mash up your re-election legacy, that you're so happy about saying 6.
Don't run. You do not so defeated a sixth time again.
Your friend was telling you this in 2008 and you listen to your friend. This is why it's so important why we are here today. And it's important because we will continue. Keep it locked, guys. Stay put.
Their decision not to contest is as a consequence of their inability to rally together as one organization and support a single individual as leader of their party.
I think he's about to contradict his own self there. So let me see if he does it.
They were rumbling chaotically along toward November 27th.
So he knew a specific date that they were going to select a leader. So what is all this?
Not to contest is as a consequence of their inability to rally together as one organization.
But they were going to be rallying together on November 27th as one organization.
And support a single individual.
And choose a leader, a single individual. He also contradicts himself furthermore. Listen.
As leader of their party. They were rumbling chaotically.
Chaotically. You see how he uses words that, you know, hey, chaotic, or rumbling chaotically. But he used November 27 that we're going to be coming together to choose the leader. Anyways, let's continue.
Along toward November 27th, party conference.
Party conference, yes.
At which no less than 6 persons.
So it's one thing when you don't have anybody who wants to vie for leadership. But it's another thing, you have no less than 6, which means 6 is the minimum amount of people who are trying to vie to become leader. People want to become leader of the opposition. They want to become leader of the United Workers' Party opposition. No less than 6. Isn't that commendable? But when it comes down to your party now, who next to take space over you? Who next to replace you? Been there for a while. Why don't you give somebody else a chance? Instead, you decide to replace the other ministers, not yourself. But you're talking about the 6 people who are, at least 6 people who are contending for the United Workers' Party opposition ticket as for leader. I mean, that to me is a good thing. I could be wrong, guys. Let me know if I'm wrong, if that is a good thing, because apparently Prime Minister saying no less than 6 people contending for leader of the opposition, which means that people really want to become leader of the opposition. For what reason? Even though they're getting all the blows they're getting from the Mr. Speaker, Ted Kalbash right there, and you know, all the hosts doing magic, they want to become the leader of the opposition. Isn't that a good thing? Isn't? I could be wrong. Let's continue.
Have declared an intention to run for leadership.
Completely contradict his first thing there. Completely.
The conference on November 27 was not going to unite them.
What was it? What was?
It was going to further divide them.
How it further divide them if you get in a leader? Everybody coming together and who's they going to vote as the Democratic Party would normally do, which was supposed to happen to your party, where they would vote for different candidates. If you want to change up somebody, if the people want to change off people, then they'll say, okay, I don't want this guy to represent me no more. Let's have a by-election in this place, where the normal democratic process is done. But that's not what is happening on your side. You just decide, you know what, let me take out that person there and put that person there. Let me give that person some money because that person might make noise or this kind of things there. So I can replace them and put them. Maybe you will still get some funds and all those kind of things there. You guys will still get money. Who knows the kind of conditions that you have in for your side. So your side seems to be running on a dictatorial path, and that is evidential. Right there, versus on the other team that come together and say, hey, we will see who we're voting for to take the leadership position. That is of a democratic process. But let's continue.
Everyone they had approached to join the party as a candidate was joining on condition of becoming the leader of the party.
So who will be on the condition to join? Who's going to vote? Are you the one going to select? I mean, Magwesa, what you're saying there is a good thing. If people are coming in to join the party and say, hey, there's a reason why they would want to become the opposition leader. Not the prime minister, you know, you realize I say that? The opposition leader. So that means even if they're not the prime minister, they would be proud to serve as opposition leader of the United Workers' Party. That says something about the party, doesn't it, Mr. Prime Minister?
And so, my friends, the decision not to contest was not taken after no vote on electoral reform.
Yes, it did. But it's rather interesting that you're mentioning that no vote on electoral reform, and you seem to be pushing it on the other team. But what about you now? This is where the bombshell should drop. This is, of course, from the Sir Dennis Byron guy himself, right there. This is a letter that was sent to Mr. Linton, and I believe SKERRIT also got the same letter as well. Now, guys, I want you guys to pay attention very closely to the dates right there. This is 6th November. This is the 6th of November. This letter was sent to Lennox Linton. Now, I want you guys to keep in mind why the Prime Minister called elections so early. Remember, I mentioned to you guys about this thing right there. His friend told him, such reforms, electoral reforms, will undermine your re-election legacy. And the reforms that they're talking about is ID cards and complete registration, re-registration. It will undermine. So let's go back to the very thing that Sir Dennis Byron did. SKERRIT them that brought this guy in, you know, to do an analysis. So SKERRIT as November 6, 2022. Let's go down there. I greet you respectfully, Secretary Linton, and assured you that I am working together to expedite the presentation of my recommendation for the improvement of the electoral process in the Commonwealth of Dominica. I will be presenting my report in 2 phases. Phase 1 will be will deal with the registration of electorals, and phase 2 will with the election process. I'm in the final stage of the phase 1 report. Okay, it is with this context that I present to you on the confidential cover a draft registration of the electoral bill and draft registration of electoral regulations, and invite you to study these drafts. So I'm guessing there's some separate thing that they sent to him and available for, you know, for consultative meeting regarding them at a time to be agreed. Okay, these drafts should not be presented to the public, so I'm guessing that's why we didn't get, but of course that letter did go out stating these things right there. And let me give you the time. The time is important, guys. The time is very important. So if you want to read the rest of this, guys, read the rest of these things. But I'm going to show you the times that are so important right there. Remember, we are in November. Okay. Okay. I do not present accompanying information, but I am willing to respond to your inquiries and submit any information you may request. Finally, my proposals are to the timelines going forward are as follows. Let me say that again. Finally, my proposals as to the timelines going forward are as follows. I will present phase 1 report during the month of November 2022. That is this month. He will present this phase 1 report to them. Obviously, if that began, it would not make sense for SKERRIT to call elections knowing that phase 1 of this electoral reform would have happened. Therefore, he called elections to ensure that he beat that very thing. Because you cannot tell me that this guy is starting electoral reform and you calling elections during that time would not make sense. So he had to call it before all these things took place. Phase 1 was starting in November 2022. Interesting, ain't it? So would it make sense for the Prime Minister to call elections before the phase 1 of the very electoral reform vibes happen, which of course his best friend warned him that such reforms will undermine your re-election legacy, as the opposition will say. Look at, of course, these reforms as ID card and complete re-registration right there. So he knows this, the Prime Minister knows this, that this will affect his re-election, and therefore called it before this came to pass. This was November 6th, you know, guys. That was 3 days ago. 3 days ago. I think it's on that same day the very Prime Minister called and the election. He couldn't wait. Interesting stuff, ain't it? Number 2, that was number 1. Number 2, parliament tables the register of electorals legislation in December. So next month the Parliament will table the register of electorals legislation with the plan to enact it in January 2023. So in phases, November it begins, December Parliament tables the registration of electoral legislation, and January it will be enacted in January 2023, so that the register of electorals could be compiled in accordance with the recommendations during the calendar year. So during that time would not make sense for the Prime Minister to call elections. He had to do it before, and he did it on December, November 6th, that he called the elections. That's interesting, ain't it? Don't you think so? I think that's very interesting, Mr. Prime Minister. Even if you're trying to say, oh, they did not, they weren't if they have the leader, of course, there was time for them to be able to do whatever they had to do. But you realize the electoral reform was coming, and you say, hey, no, we need to call it before. Number 3, I will present phase 2 of the report after a consultation process similar to that undertaken for phase 1 in February and March. So January they would have brought in parliamentary to table the registration of electoral reforms, and of course in February and March, which is the next 2 months, February or March, the next 2 months, he will present phase 2 of the reports after the consultation process similar to that of which was undertaken in phase 1. So phase 2 will begin February, March 2023. It would not make sense for the Prime Minister to call them while electoral reform is being implemented. He had to do it before. He had to call it before. Interesting, ain't it? And number 4, Parliament tables and enacts the phase 2 legislation in March, April 2023. Electoral reform take place. So if the Prime Minister had to call it elections after that now, from April 2023, then guess what? His re-election legacy would be tainted. ID cards and re-registration. That was one of the things that would be implemented in there. The Prime Minister had to beat this for him to maintain another 5 years in election in this thing. He had to beat it. So Mr. Prime Minister wants to come and fool people as if people are foolish and did not see that very thing, the writing on the wall. You would be foolish to believe that what the Prime Minister is saying about they're not ready and thing. You knew. You got the letter the same day. If not the same day, you got it before a few weeks or something back, or whenever you got it, but you got it before January or on November 6th. You'd have got it before or on November 6th, Mr. Prime Minister, and you saw this and said, no, this cannot happen, because this was going to implement electoral reform in Dominica. So you had to beat it. Let's continue.
Let me give you the real background. The real background.
So this is what he's saying.
They pull out from contestant.
Why the UWP then pull out from the contestant. We already established that electoral reform was not done, and as a result of electoral reform not done, the implementation of it was going to happen. The Prime Minister saw this, had to jump ahead for him to call elections before electoral reform is done, before he loses his legacy. And now he wants to give his bogus crap.
Last evening, of the 10 new candidates.
Listen to the foolishness that the Prime Minister is about to say. This is the competence of Dominica. No, guys, the people watching out there, this is not Dominica. This is just people just forming the royal donkey. Dominicans are not that foolish, okay? Dominicans generally are not that foolish. We have some foolish Dominicans, true. But generally, Dominicans are not foolish. It's just unfortunate that circumstances tend to keep Dominicans down. And when you see certain things, some people cannot talk because they'll be victimized. So you find a lot of things of people talking a lot of foolishness in the places because those who have the knowledge to speak about these things will feel victimized or have been victimized before and therefore are quiet about certain things. So keep this in mind.
Who will be joining Labour in this election. And so, 10 new candidates. We met last night with some of the outgoing members of the Parliament and with our senior advisors. We met at a public space. We met the 10 new candidates in a public space. Someone took note of all who entered that building and all who left that building.
How did you know somebody took notes of somebody leaving and entering the building? Were you watching these people take notes and enter in the building? Don't you think if that is the case, don't you think that can be a dangerous thing of somebody spying on what is going on, or maybe could cause harm to you or the people out there? If you saw somebody doing these things, I mean, doesn't... Okay.
And then they relate that to the Workers' Party. And when they saw the names of people who were going to run, they decided, no way, we cannot beat those candidates, and therefore we're not going to contest elections.
That is what he's telling his supporters. That is what he's telling his supporters. Some of the supporters don't think. They don't think. They just swallow whatever foolishness that the Prime Minister is telling them. Idiotics. And this is what they accept and say, yeah, true. Foolishness. They literally, it was literally being implemented right there. And the Prime Minister had to beat this for him to call elections. It didn't matter if the UWP them was ready, leadership or whatnot. He called it because he wanted to beat this, because he knew that his friend told him about electoral reform. His friend told him, I leave today. He said these guys are talking about reforms to include ID cards and complete re-registration. Such reforms will undermine your re-election legacy, as the opposition will look and say the commissioner agreed with us. Reform was required because of the widespread fraud. Even the CCJ agreed, saying future elections in Dominica ought not to proceed with these similar taints. There have been some taints that have in the elections, and they need to be rectified, and they were being rectified right there. But you had to jump ahead, Mr. Prime Minister, and then you're telling the people about, oh, they saw people in the DLP team, new candidates, and they say, what, we cannot beat that, but let us come out there. You find that making sense? The level of idiocracy. Let me continue.
That is why they're not running. They know they could not win a single seat in the north of Dominica.
Isn't Marigot in the north of Dominica? It's more northeast, but it's still considered the north, no? So isn't Marigot always voting for the UWP team?
They know they cannot test us in the south of Dominica.
Isn't Roseau considered part of the south of Dominica? Isn't? No? Maybe Roseau is considered the west. Maybe the west. Let's say west. Okay. I'll say okay.
They know they cannot test us in the west of Dominica.
There's Salisbury. Salisbury is not in the west of Dominica. Salisbury always voting for UWP. They have never voted for DLP. So what do you mean they can't test all in the west?
And when they believe they had a little glimmer of hope in the east, when that woman who wanted to be leader of the Workers' Party from Lapland saw the name that is going to run in the Lapland constituency, she said, well, I feel bad. I cannot win that seat because...
So you say all this to try to hide the real fact of the matter, knowing that the electoral reform was going to take place. Knowing that it was going to take place. And then you decide to call the same elections, even though the same East you just talk about there, you decide to remove money from them to put it in elections, so you can run election campaign, when these monies could go into rehabilitating the East after the deadliest natural disaster probably in 5 years that happened in Dominica. The craziest natural disaster that happened in like 5 years in Dominica. You at the same time, as a wicked man, you decide to call elections so that you can re-elect yourself. But the electoral reform was taking place. Look, it's right there. November 2022. Phase 1 was about to start. To April 2023, where phase 2 would have been completed, and of course, Parliament would have tabled the measures that was taken under the reform by Dennis Byron. So all this was gonna happen, and you decide to call elections, and then you want to say, oh, they see candidate coming, so they say, but I can't handle that, let me go and hide. Be your Ted Calbas. Anyways, guys, let me know your thoughts in this regard. Leave your thoughts in the comment box below. Don't forget to check out the previous reaction that I did. It'll be in the first comment in the comment box below, guys. And of course, I'll see you guys in the next reaction video. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you understand it. And with all that said, guys, be real, be positive.